On today's podcast, I've got Medab Shabir here, who's a digital strategist and an account director, and he's been in the field for 15 years. And welcome to the podcast today, Medab.
Thank you for having me on. Looking forward to the discussions we're about to have.
Excellent. So I just thought it'd be really good for us to get an insight of somebody who's been in the field for a very long time. And we've got a range of different questions, but before we start, are you comfortable? Are you good to go?
Yeah, good to go.
Excellent. So,
although I do have a little complaint that you gave away my age a little bit by saying I was in the industry for 15 years.
Wow, okay. So is that more important, or should we lie about your age? We can take another retake if you want.
Oh, I'm joking, go on.
Okay, so we've obviously been going now for the last 2 years, and we often come across clients and they make things out very simple, like, just do some social media stuff, just post daily and just get it out there. And they think that, daily posting and the quality doesn't really matter. They just think that anything will just work. So what would you say to these kind of clients and these kind of comments that they have?
So I think there's stages. So first of all, you've got to have a strategy about what you're posting and an aim. So understanding your audience and the type of messages you want to get out there. That's the most important thing. Now, you should be always doing something that relates to that strategy and is in line with, okay, are we providing knowledge? Are we providing fun knowledge? Are we providing deep facts and details, but all about what you're trying to achieve and what your audience wants to hear? Just putting media content, social media content out there, it's a little bit of a haphazard machine gun approach, and if it sticks, it sticks, whereas you can really focus your time and the quality of your content better if you're looking to serve a particular goal, which is educate your audience, inform your audience, whatever that might be.
I think one of the things that you've kind of described there is a business would need to know their identity first. And I think that's one of the things that we found in the first year, definitely, where we were working with businesses who didn't even have a logo, didn't even have a website. And in reality, now that I'm thinking about it, and on the back of your last comment, they didn't know who they truly are. And when you don't know who you are, then you don't know who your client is. You don't know what your messaging is. And I think that's something that I think businesses need to learn their identity before they can start to do any level of marketing.
100%. And it's one of the things that throughout my career, what we've done when we've taken on new clients is we'll put together a workshop which I've always called an understanding your business workshop. So it's where I'll sit down with the client and ask them questions around who they are, what they're trying to achieve, just as a business, not necessarily their digital strategy, but as an organization, how long they've been around, who formed them, how long have they been formed for, what was the driver behind why they were formed, who are their audience, what type of clientele do they have, how does that differ from male to female, or between 18 and 30 or 30 and 50, however those ages might be, and really try to understand who they are. Because sometimes if they don't know who their audience is, we might have the expertise to be able to guide them into who they are. So a really important part of every client engagement at the outset, in my opinion, is that understanding. Because what happens from that is they might already know all those things that you've said, they might not. But it helps you as an organization as well, and you'll create a document around that you put together internally and spread internally, so that everyone in your organization, for example Trickle Up, has got that knowledge. So when they're thinking and strategizing, they've always got these key bits of information about who they are and what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think we're on version 3 of our getting to know your client document, and I think now we've started to ask the right questions to be able to get the right level of information out. And I think once you've got that information back and then you package it all up, and then when you present it back to the client's quite, they're amazed, and they're like, wow, even though they're the ones who've provided that information, but the way that you're asking the question, it can be quite insightful for the client as well.
Yeah, very much so. Anecdotally, just in the job that I was in previously with GRM Digital, for 12 years. Just as I was leaving, I was handing over some documents, and I went through with our clients the kind of documents that we'd put together. And I remember 1 or 2 comments from maybe 1 or 2 different clients saying, oh, seems like you know the business better than I do.
Yeah.
So it is one of them where you really, as the agency, you really have to try to understand that client as deep as possible, because people come and go. So knowledge transfers. And if you are an agency who's been with that organization for a while, you should have knowledge internally. And even if people are coming and going internally, you should have those kind of documents put together where that knowledge transfers at your end as well.
Yeah, because that's one of the biggest concerns, isn't it? That if someone was to leave, then you've got a knowledge drain about that particular client. But obviously, what we do is we will have that internal meeting to begin with the client, make sure we document everything, and then that then becomes one version of the truth, then, doesn't it? But one of the things that I found, and I've already kind of touched upon it, and I don't know what, from your experience, if you can shed some more light on it, the difference between small businesses and more established businesses. And we found that the smaller business who didn't have any marketing or is new to marketing, they were a lot harder to work with than somebody who's already established.
Yeah, so I think the difference here is when you've got a small business, usually it might be a sole owner as well of that business. So a lot of decisions made are money going out of my pocket into something. So if I'm going to invest £2,000 a month, for example, they feel a little bit like it's a microwave, and you turn it on to 2 minutes and then it goes ding and the results are there and whatever is there is made.
Yeah.
And this is quite key in when you're engaging with a client, is to make sure that they understand that it's all a process. Things change, there's trial and error, and you've got to try and work at it constantly. And I think that the thing that you're saying about small business versus big business, small business is usually that element, whereas big business are usually people who are special, like a digital marketing manager, a head of IT, things like that. So they know the business already.
And they appreciate that things are going to take time. And
exactly. And they're more open to, because they've got more knowledge. I suppose, if I give the example of taking your car into the mechanic. Now, I've known you for a while. I know that you know a lot more about cars than I do. So I take my car into the mechanic and I go, fix this please. And he'll go, it's £500. And I'll say, that's too much. Because I don't know what he's fixing. Whereas you might say, oh, why is it £500? And he'll go, oh, the exhaust needs X, and like the oil filter needs Y. And you go, oh yeah, perfect, move with it. And that's the kind of difference. If somebody's got that knowledge and understanding, it's a lot easier for them to understand what you're trying to achieve and the difficulty in achieving it. Because this world is not easy. You don't click your fingers and everything's great.
Well, obviously I engage with a lot of Facebook ads and YouTube ads and things like this. So what happens? I get more ads about Facebook and marketing and all this kind of stuff. And everybody is trying to sell that I've got the winning formula, follow my strategy and you will win. And it's unbelievable that people are still falling for that. Because they must be, because that's why they're spending all this money on advertising, and everyone's got the winning recipe. If you do this, you're going to get thousands of leads and you're going to be a multimillionaire like I am. And I sit there thinking to myself, if you were a multimillionaire, why are you still making Facebook ads and trying to get more leads?
Trying to become a multi-billionaire.
Multi-billionaire, yeah.
No, I think it's definitely not one shoe fits all. So that kind of marketing is probably basic level in terms of it's going to engage those people again who are not as in tune with how this works.
Yeah, that's small business.
Yeah, and it's not insulting to small businesses, because I assume, let's say you've got a solicitor's firm. The person who heads up that solicitor's firm is probably an expert in law, not in IT.
Or marketing.
So then they might think, oh, yeah, this sounds easy, let's go down that route. Whereas it's definitely, be like water, because not everything's the same. So you've got to adapt to what your target audience is and what you're trying to achieve in essence.
Yeah. So based on your experience and everything that you know about marketing, give us a fancy explanation of what is a marketing strategy? Because that gets banded around a lot, doesn't it? What's the marketing strategy?
Well, look, it depends is the simplest answer and probably the most complicated answer, because it opens a lot of avenues of what does it depend on. Again, it all comes back to what are you trying to achieve? And then you've got, and who your audience is, right? So if your audience is 13-year-old girls, you might be looking at using TikTok, because they're probably less likely to engage with Facebook. If we talk about social media advertising, for example, they're probably less likely to engage with Facebook. That might be more your middle-aged person. Instagram might be your 20 to 40s kind of thing. So a marketing strategy just depends on who your audience is, and what you're trying to achieve. So that's the answer. So there is no answer, in essence. So it's not, like the example you just gave, come to me, I've got the winning formula, there's 1,000 leads coming to you a day.
It's a bespoke strategy based on your business.
Everyone.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, there'll be things that cross over, of course, because as you'll see, when you work with a number of different industries, certain things will work in the housing sector that also worked in providing golf carts. It's not like, everything has to be totally different, but it is bespoke, and it depends on the industry you're in and who your audience is and how you're trying to engage.
And I think it's also about what the business is actually wanting as well. So as an example, if we would think of any typical business who is selling some products, they'd probably want an SEO strategy, but that'll be more of a long-term strategy because you're not going to get results on that in the near future. But then meanwhile, they need work in the short term, so they might then supplement that with some Google Ads performance or some Meta ads. And what that does then is that you've got a short-term fix and a long-term fix, but they've got to kind of both work together.
Yeah, 100%. And look, the Google Ads is not a short-term fix. If you have the budget, you should be constantly doing that.
Yeah.
And reviewing, how you're approaching it, etc. And that's something that I know that you guys do here in terms of really meticulously look at the data, look at what's working, what's not working, and how to sort of make it, adapt it is the word I'm looking for, to try and make it work better.
Yeah.
So the Google Ads and PPC is a long-term strategy as well, but 100% SEO is something that you don't see a result in a month. It's a longer-term strategy that you've, again, constantly got to be working at. And this will be the common theme throughout everything you do. And, it's kind of the topic of this conversation is consistency. And you've got to consistently be working at these things.
Yeah. So obviously we've talked heavily about consistency, but I think within marketing, one of the things that's really important is adaptability. If we think about once upon a time, it was all about billboards and on bus shelters and cinemas and TV adverts. But nowadays, I know that businesses are spending far less on the traditional print media and traditional marketing strategies than what they are doing on newer marketing strategies. So what do you think that businesses need to do to be able to be adaptable in this changing?
Well, adaptability is on so many things. If you just go back 4 years, like we will have had a strategy, 4.5 years, we'll have had a strategy around, let's say, for example, I've worked with some of the Royal Colleges in terms of medicine, and they'll have had a strategy in what they were trying to do and achieve, and then COVID comes along. And now you have to adapt that very, very quickly. So being agile, whether it's internally within your teams or through outsourcing to an agency or working or partnering with an agency, because it's not always outsourcing, agility is key. So it's just making sure that you stay on top of whatever. So if we use the example of medical organizations, what's new, what's happening, and it's ensuring that you are staying on top of that knowledge to be able to market. So let's say, for example, a year ago, I guess, I've not used it as you can tell, but Ozempic came out. And so a lot of pharmacies and medical organizations were either trying to market it or trying to put out papers around it because it became a real big sort of talking topic. So it's just making sure that you stay on top of what these topics are, what these trends are, and put out content around that, whether it's for, against, about, providing more information. But key is agility. It's very rare, like you said, we're in an ever-evolving industry. AI's around, and
I was wondering how long it was going to take us to mention AI.
No, but the thing is that AI is so broad that I wouldn't even know where to start. You know, so we talk about ChatGPT, which helps you. You've got video content, you've got automation of certain activities. So if you're in AI, for example, or you're an IT company who are putting out AI software, staying on top of those things as well and putting content out around it, what's new, what's happening, it's very key. So knowledge around whatever your industry is and being able to adapt is massive. And look, you have a lot of organizations who talk about digital transformation. So a guy I used to work with, the CEO of the former company I used to work for, a gentleman called Nej, he often talked about not digital transformation, digital evolution, because things are always evolving. So you can't go, oh, we're going to do a transformation and here we go, here's the stop point.
Yeah.
It's
Done.
It's not.
It's not done.
It's evolving constantly. And
Yeah.
that's the same thing with marketing and digital marketing strategies and the avenues you're using.
Yeah, I think obviously with AI popping up, I've had it where clients are saying to me, "Oh, you can just AI that, can't you?" And I was recently having a conversation with someone. I said the amount of AI you think we're actually going to use is very little. You know, don't get me wrong, we will use it at times, but it's strategically used. It's not, the way that some AI companies are nowadays advertising, put in your business name and we'll create X, Y, and Z for you. It's never as simple as that. And meanwhile, the algorithms of Google or whatever that search algorithm is, that's not going to recognize it, and it's not going to push it where you need to push it anyway. So there's loads of limitations which I feel that clients don't see, and they don't understand what them limitations are.
Look, I think that in the digital world, and if you kind of say IT world as well, in essence it's limitless if you've got limitless budget. So when a client talks about, oh, you can AI that, okay, but then you have to provide software to AI it, make sure that so you've got to do now as a digital agency and a partner, you've got to go now do the due diligence all around that product. Is it going to do what the client wants it to do? How much does it cost? What are the drawbacks? What are its competitors? Blah, blah, blah. There's a cost element to that as well. So yeah, AI is out there and we're still in its infancy. And I'm sure it will start to become more and more bread and butter in what people do. I was just a couple of days ago, I was sat with a couple of barrister friends of mine, and one of them, what does he do? Corporate law documents. And this is in Pakistan. And I was saying, well, you could use like a ChatGPT to do a lot of that for you and save you time. And he was like, oh no, but I don't think it'll be right. And I'm like, I don't think it will either, but it might be 80% right.
Yeah.
So now you've only got to go through it and adjust 20% of things rather than writing it from scratch and doing 100% of it.
And that's where I feel that we'll do that. That's our approach. 80% of it would possibly be done via AI, and then the remaining 20%. But that's the expertise that you need to be able to make it better than whatever AI's done.
100%.
The human element.
And you need the human element for sure. And what I was explaining to him as well is, I said, look, I recommended him to actually try it for a few days. So I said, so take a day out each week over the next 5-6 weeks, try it, see how it goes for you. I said, because what will happen for sure is in the coming years, 1, 2, 3 years, everyone within your industry will be using this. And now when you're saying to a client, oh, I need 10 days to do this, but the people who are using it are saying, I need 2 days to do it, you're going to start losing your clients very quickly.
Yeah.
So again, it comes back to that adaptability. So you've got to be able to adapt with the times, but know where to use it and when to use it.
And that's the skill.
That is the skill.
I was watching a video a couple of days ago, and the new iPhone 16 with Apple Intelligence, I'd say probably 40-50% of the features that ChatGPT's got are already built into the operating system of the phone. So, you know, it's ever evolving, and we're seeing AI coming into numerous things. And I think now that they've got the software right, it's just about now implementing it into your laptop and all the other things. And that's not going to take a long time. I think a couple of years at most.
For sure, that will be out soon. Look, you use those examples. Look at LinkedIn. If you use LinkedIn Premium, there's AI now integrated with that. So it makes it easier to do a lot of things that you want to do through LinkedIn as well.
You're right. I was recently having a conversation with someone, and I think I put, we should catch up soon. And then my next message pre-typed out was, should we arrange a meeting? And I was like, wow, this is already trying to prompt me to now have a meeting, and they've already configured it in that way. But yeah, the computers are taking over.
iRobot.
And that's it. Or I hope it's not Terminator robots. But,
I'll be back.
Yeah. How does so obviously it's important that we have a strategy, because if not, then you're not heading in one particular direction. I used to have a boss years ago. He used to talk about arrows being aligned, and I think a strategy does that. It gets everyone aligned in the same direction. Everyone's clear. We're singing off the same hymn sheet, and there's one version of the truth. But then, how do you measure the success of that strategy?
So the key thing, and it's what I've preached throughout my career, is KPIs. So you have to put KPIs in place at the outset. So what are you trying to achieve? And it's not always, you know, I think I feel, this is my personal opinion, people confuse this a little bit. They'll say, we need to have 10% growth in X, number of visitors, number of conversions, whatever it is. I always talk about upward trends. So we want to work towards that, and we want to see a trend going upwards. If we're working towards upward trends, then, and we're achieving upward trends, then we're online to start. We're doing the right thing, and we can start to adapt it a little bit to try and do it a little bit better. But KPIs are key, and whether they, as I said, that might be, if you're talking about a web page, you might talk about like bounce rates, time on page, visitors. If you talk about SEO, again, visitors, time on page, exit pages, conversions. If you talk about web design, conversions as well. If you're talking about PPC, okay, impressions, click-throughs, conversions, revenue. Obviously, revenue drives everything. You know, every organization.
That was the point I was going to make. I was going to say to you that, you know, for the last my time at Trickle Up, I'm aware of all these KPIs, and we'll highlight these, and we'll talk to clients about all of these. But in my previous business, we would have turned around and said, actually, we're hiding behind the KPIs, and the ultimate measure is how much money you're making.
So I think that's a difficult one to actually answer, because when you work with smaller organizations, potentially, but when you're working with bigger organizations and some smaller ones, you don't have the access to all of that. So some things might happen offline that's come via a digital marketing strategy and campaign that you've put together. So, but you've got no way to allocate that back to the campaign.
Yeah.
You might have like, slipping my mind now, but there's certain softwares that put different phone numbers for different campaigns. So if somebody is to call, they would see that. You have the UTM tags, which can track back to a campaign when it's a conversion. But sometimes you can't. And unless you've got access to all the financial details of an organization, which is very rare, then you can't exactly talk revenue.
Yeah.
And you can't attribute revenue necessarily.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, when we first started, there's one particular client I'm thinking of, and we were doing all the great activity, and we're running ads, and we're running social media campaigns, and there's loads of SEO activity going on. And over a period of time, then what happened is then they started doing some influencer marketing. And all of a sudden, now we've got no idea where that that customer's coming from. Is he coming from influencer marketing? Has he seen the ad? Have they? Is it an SEO question? And then I think it took us probably 4 to 5 weeks to kind of go backwards and then to put all the things in place to be able to measure, okay, here's a landing page that we've given now to the influencer. So when the influencer's now going to get a lead in, it's going to come in from that direction. We talked about telephone numbers and other avenues. And now when we've got all the tracking in place, now we can specifically say, this is how much is generated from here. Even if it's not a monetary value, it's still a lead. And then we can then have a look at where do we need to put more energy and more effort. And now that we've got that visibility of the KPIs, life's so much easier. And it allows us to be able to say, actually, we've done X, and then this is what's been delivered, which is great.
So great, the outcome at the end. The problem that you obviously encountered was, and if we talk about the strategy, the client hadn't told you their intention to use an influencer, if I'm correct, right? So your strategy was in place, but the strategy as a whole wasn't aligned. So understanding that a digital marketing team should be an extension of your team.
Yeah.
So when you're putting strategies in place, they should be aware. So you should have been aware, for example, that they're gonna engage an influencer. So either how do we supplement that, or how do we attribute like what's been brought in through the influencer, what's been brought in through the digital marketing agency.
Yeah, I think that us not knowing that was a separate challenge, but that raised loads of challenges in itself, because I think the influencer posted on the Friday, and by the Monday, everyone's celebrating and asking for pay rises because we've done such a great job. And in reality, it was, and I think it took us about another 3 days to realize that actually there was an influencer involved, and they're the ones who've attributed that. So, I think there's a couple of things there. Number one, a client should always be speaking to the marketing agency and everyone's on the same page. But I think more importantly, to your point, which is you've got to have the measures in place to be able to measure where leads are coming from, where the sales are coming from. And that way then you can really tweak it and you can adjust the campaigns as necessary as well. So let's predict the future then. So, again,
Liverpool to win the Premier League.
Oh well, we wish. Yeah, it'd be awesome if this happens. But nonetheless, if we think of marketing future, which direction it's going, I think it's really difficult to predict, because even if we think of current trends now, you wouldn't have been able to predict them in the last 2-3 years ago. So where do you think marketing's going? Where do you think businesses are going? What do you think the big companies are doing? Kind of an open-ended question for you there.
It's very open-ended and it's difficult. So it's very difficult because at the moment we've got a lot of social media, and say TikTok, for example, a lot of organizations are using TikTok more, because what we've gone away from is just throwing content out there. We've gone to more like trying to create narratives and stories, and how, for example, I always talk, when I've talked to clients in the past, I'm doing a bit of a rewind here, but when I've talked to clients in the past about who they are, what they're trying to achieve, and sometimes they've talked about, oh, we need to tell the client all about us. We were formed in 1932 and we're chocolate, I'm talking about Butler's chocolate cakes now, but like we're chocolate specialists, but no one cares. How are you solving the problem or providing a solution for the client for what they want?
Yeah.
And that's the key. And I think the messaging now has gone, I think most of the marketing world understand that. And they're trying to really get there and create an emotional connection as well between themselves and the client. And I think that social media and videos and TikTok and Instagrams, etc., are trying to bridge that gap to create that emotional connection between the brand and the audience. Yeah. I don't have a magic wand do you remember that octopus that was picking the World Cup winners in every match? I don't have that magic wand. At the minute, I see that that's still going to be a lot of where we go down. How we do it is a different story, and we've talked about AI, etc. So it might be that even more content is getting thrown out there because it's easier to put content together.
Yeah.
So that might be the change that happens. And it might start to become a little bit like, you have Netflix shows, right? Really broken down versions of marketing that is telling a story, and they're so engaged with their clients that they can tell it in bits rather than all at once.
Yeah. I was thinking about this last night. I don't think you've watched it, but I've just recently watched The Orville, and it's by Seth MacFarlane, the guy who did Family Guy,
Right.
Simpsons, and all of that kind of stuff. And it's a little bit funny, but it's sci-fi, and I like sci-fi anyway. And I was watching it, and by the end of it, I was thinking to myself, there's probably millions of people who've watched this around the world. There's millions of people who will watch this, and it's all about creating a community. And I was just sat there just once it finished, and I was thinking, how do you create a community that taps in to all them people that have watched the Orville? So Orville, I know you've not watched it, but let's say Games of Thrones. Yeah. There's millions of people out there in the world that have seen that have some level of, they're fans of it. Yeah. How do you tap into that? And I think that for me is I don't have the answer. It's about how do you tap into it, and how do you then monetize it? How do you then utilize it for your own marketing strategies? But if someone was to ask me the same question, what does the future hold? I believe it's all about communities. It's about building community and then obviously nurturing that community. And we've seen it over the last few years, and I just feel it'll just continue. Video is going to continue to be king, and content's everything. And I feel maybe if I'm to make a prediction, I hope Liverpool do win the league this season. But over the next 5 years, I think what will happen is you'll have more films and like kind of little series that people will just be able to shoot on their phones. They'll have editing equipment. We got a software recently where you could make people into a robot, and you could make them do some crazy things. And it's like, wow, like it's so accessible now. Obviously, we do all of our editing on professional editing software, but it's not long before anybody can just mess about and get it done on an app on your phone, or get it done on a software on your computer. Yeah,
and I think that comes back to what I'm saying, that I think there's just going to be so much more content out there to consume. And what you talked about communities, that's a little bit like I talked about being so engaged with your audience that you'll be able to create snippets of stories that maybe don't tell everything about how you're fixing your clients' or potential customers' problems in one go. It's over the course of 2, 3, 4 because of that engagement.
Okay, so thank you very much, Madab. Really good conversation. We've talked about strategy is really important, consistency is important. We've also talked about communities, remaining adaptable as a business, and even though you're going to take on a marketing agency, it doesn't mean they're going to get you results within a couple of weeks. Marketing takes time.
No, marketing definitely takes time. And you, for your audience, what I will say is you will know if you've picked the correct agency based on the questions that they're asking and the expectations that they're setting. So, if you rewind to earlier when you said, one shoe fits all, I can get you X and Y. That won't be the case. Someone who asks you the right questions and sets your expectations correctly doesn't mean that they don't have to be ambitious. It just means that they have to be realistic. And you'll know that you're engaging with the right agency.
Yeah, it's all about having a tailored approach, isn't it, based on your business?
Yeah, very much so. And look, I've been in and around your office for a while now, popping in and out and meeting your staff, etc., and seeing the brainstorming that goes on. And I know that you guys are on a very good track to provide extremely great value to your clients, and long may that continue.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that review as well at the end. Okay.
3-star Google, I didn't get T.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
All right, brilliant. Thank you for having me.